Welcome to the Town of Kirkland Lake special meeting of public meeting for planning. Before we start, I'd just like to introduce Eve LaBelle. Eve will be taking over for Don Parcher as the interim director of Public Works. Eve, if you wouldn't mind standing up. Welcome to Kirkland Lake. Approval of the agenda.
So I have a motion that is moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacey White, that Council approves the agenda for the special public planning meeting of September 17th, 2019 as presented.
All in favor? Approved. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Councillor Perrier?
Yes, I'd like to take a declaration of pecuniary interest towards the Nettie Lake project, as I have a trailer out there. Okay?
Okay, duly noted, thank you. Reports of municipal officers and communication. We have Rick Hunter from Planscape. You have the floor. Counselor, Counselor comments? Counselor Adams?
So when the residents come up to speak, are they going to, and they ask their questions, are they going to get answers eventually? Someone going to take the questions?
Go ahead.
I'll definitely take their answers, their questions down. Jenna is also working on taking their questions down. So anything that is recorded or said here at this meeting, we will get answers back.
Perfect.
Counselor Owens?
Yeah, just before it opens up to the public, and I haven't seen any reference to this anywhere, do you have any numbers on how many of the septic systems currently on the lake are approved septic systems and how many are historic? Because the issue seems to be lake capacity and pollution and whatnot, and I think that's an important thing to know, for council to know prior to making any decisions, because old septic systems were, at the very least, very leaky. They let a lot of pollutants into the soil and ultimately down to the lakes. Replacing a septic system is very expensive, so I know in many cases people have either ignored orders or put them off. So I'm just wondering if there's any information about the current septic systems and how many there are on that lake.
Yeah, Rick, just a comment and a question as well. When you look back, I believe it's January 12th, 1968, 78, I should say, the Ministry of Housing was the authority in place at that time. Normally, I would have thought the OMB would be involved, but I understand if there's a plan of subdivision, the Ministry of Housing is involved. So that was the authority of the day. And when you look at that original review that they completed, item 12A, no new vacant lots to be created. Now we're coming back and looking at creating more lots. The lake was under heavy stress at that time, and quite honestly, I don't understand why we're even looking at this point. It was fairly clear what the ministry had told us, and we've been negligent as the municipality is concerned. And I think this just puts us at a higher level of liability and more stress on the lake. And I'm just wondering how binding is the Ministry of Housing item 12A as noted? Yeah, one other point, the original approval had allotted 5% for parkland or green space. I think that's what I call it, but parkland, I guess. These new lots, do they cross over the these Greenland? It's not clear in any of the reports I've seen. And if they don't, is there still going to be 5% of green space available after these lots are, if we did approve them? Yep. Okay. So it's still not quite clear. Oh, okay. Any other comments or questions, Councillor Ivanov?
Yeah, a concern I would have, you have 46 developed lots out there. Half of those are cottages, half of them are residential, permanent homes. Is that what I understand?
That's the way the calculations were looked at. I think that the number of homes is very much in the wording still. But I think
But if I owned a cottage there, could I build a permanent home out there?
under today's zoning, you cannot build a home on there. The problem, I'm saying that this problem is faced by municipalities throughout Ontario, is you can communicate in zoning that you can permit a cottage and not permanent residence.
But I winterize my cottage and I live in it all year round.
Winterize your cottage and which seasons are you in it? It's a very difficult thing to enforce, and that I think is recognized. As an example, in Muskoka, where they abandoned the differentiation between seasonal and permanent residents a number of years ago for that very reason. But basically, they moved it to a level of servicing to say that if you choose to live there year round, that's really up to you, but the policies are there, and the requirements are there, the municipality is not responsible for providing services to those lots. And that seems to have worked. Again, there are sometimes some regions with those folks.
Okay.
So in principle, your zoning bylaw only allows cottages, and I'm quite aware, CC is specified as well, that there are a few lots that definitely are capable of being used under your own.
Okay. And the other concern I would have would be the Knights of Columbus area. How much strain does that put on the lake? And I know there's quite a development there. I know they're temporary. They don't use them in the winter, but they do have them in the summer. How much extra strain does that put on the?
That's undefined, and I think that's one of the things that we think could have a peer review undertaken, but that's one of the questions that we have security, where to say how we assess the impact. I think there may be in excess of 50 trailers on the site. They are used, definitely, in that case, they're used seasonally, so they have a different factor. But I think the insurance capacity study that was done, assuming that was just one lot at the trailer park, I think the appropriate rate there is one lot with 55 trailers, with a factor, so it is the actually more development, potential impact. And as well, when we're looking at that, when we look at the housing commitment for emergency environment approvals on septic basin as well, to see what the proposed statements. So that, actually does need to be looked at, because I don't believe that the impact of the legacy property was factored into the.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Ivanoff brings up a good point about the trailer parks. What's to stop somebody from buying one of these lots or a couple lots and putting up a trailer park? Right now, we don't have any land use policy in place, whereas Bernhard Morset, I believe that subdivision has no trailer parks allowed. Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other comments, councillors? Questions? You said that the applicant wanted to say a few words. Please identify your name and address, please.
Do you mind if I stand here? I don't want to have my back
Yep,
to the...
that's sure.
okay? Can you hear me properly? Use the microphone for that?
Just, I need the microphone to pick up your voice.
If I stand and talk to it, is that okay? My name is Rob Lang. My grandfather was Ernie Deloy, who in 1945 staked 3 claims around Nettie Lake, and in 1978 proposed the first subdivision around that lake due to the cottages that had been built around the lake during that time. My mother presently owns the lots that are being set up for rezoning, and I'd like to welcome the concerned public, mayor and councilors, and address some of the concerns that have been raised tonight. You raised the point about parkland. If you check in 2003, there were several blocks of land turned over to the town of Kirkland Lake as parkland, specifically to meet the requirements of the original subdivision that was completed in 2003. There were other blocks, including the roadways and right-of-ways around the lake, that were also turned over at that time due to the subdivision agreement that was completed in that time. My first comment is I'd like to thank Brian Coughlin for writing in. He was one of the people that was concerned about this. He brought up the fact that the subdivision proposed by my grandfather was done in 1978. Unfortunately, he passed away before it became to be fulfilled. In Mr. Coughlin's letter, he said, well, they took legal action against the Deloy family in order to expropriate the 3 claims and put the subdivision in place. Mr. Coughlin was the sole responsible president of the company that was in charge of fulfilling that subdivision and all of the requirements of the subdivision. Now, part of that was supposed to be mandated controls of boats on the lake, which was not initiated, which appears by all accounts I've seen to be the main problem and source of water quality issues in the lake. I may come back to address that later. But the zoning of lots and that sort of thing, around the lake, they were all done to the same, level, which is, I believe, R1 or whatever it is, with the exception of the lots that were turned back to my mother, which were zoned parkland. Now, there's been no new park or lots created since that original subdivision. The only thing we're asking is rezoning of the lots. So there's no creation of lots, there's nothing new being created. The lots that we're asking for were originally around the lake, and at the time, we were under the assumption would have been treated as any other lot on the lake, which would have been zoned the same. Okay? So, at this point in time, we've put in an application to make a change to that, and hopefully we can address that with any concerns. There was also several other letters from people that I received some this morning, some had been earlier, that regards the quality of the water on the lake not being affected, or trees being cut down, and different things like that. They're concerned. I'm concerned about the lake. I've been on the lake for 62 years myself. There's other people, we had one letter, the lady said she's been there for 70 years. I don't want to see the lake destroyed. I've seen it. I know what it was like 60 years ago. I know what it's like now. I know the water quality is not there. And that's the other person I'd like to thank. I believe you received a letter from Ray Kenny. He is a cottage owner on Nettie Lake. He's on Sandy Drive. Nobody knows him. He's an environmental consultant. He's world-renowned. He's been all over the world doing studies. He specializes in wastewater. The information he brought forward shocked me. I know the lake is not bad. It is terrible. And anybody in here who thinks that it's not, you better look at Ray's report, because his report says the water is terrible in that lake. But one of the things he says in there is the reasoning is mainly because of gas-powered watercraft on the lake. It's not because of septic beds or anything like that. And my concern on this new technology in septic beds is incredible now. Last 20 years, we've made leaps and bounds. We have done phenomenal things with septic beds to have gotten to the point where there is zero chemicals discharged from a properly installed septic system, which I would say, if these properties are rezoned and you put on a proper house or cottage rather than a trailer, which I know a lot of people are concerned about, if you put in a proper septic bed, there should be no discharge from the cottage. The concerns become, okay, somebody gets a cottage on the lake, they put in a 200 horsepower motor on it, a big boat, away they go, or the Sea-Doo or whatever. I don't want to see that. I would propose, if these lots are rezoned, that there would be restrictions put on the deeds, that the owners and guests would not be allowed to operate a gas-powered watercraft on Nettie Lake. I'm very passionate about that lake. I've seen all the Sea-Doos run by at full tilt, 20 feet from shore, even though the ministry says it shouldn't be more than 10 kilometers an hour within 75 feet of shore. I've seen that happen on the lake. I've seen the guys out there playing all day. I'm not complaining about it. I know there's an accident waiting to happen out there, and there's a lot of compassionate people who have written about all the Sea-Doos and the lakes and everything else. I'm not going to say that there should be restrictions on that lake for boat size. I know it was in the original division agreement, but it's not my choice to make. I don't think anybody here right now is on my side. I think everybody I've seen in letters that have written submissions and are passionate about it or have complained about somebody's gonna cut down a tree or we're gonna have more pollution in the lake. I don't wanna see pollution in the lake, but I don't wanna keep paying taxes on a piece of parkland that can't be used. When somebody can take it, manage it, treat it properly, and help Nettie Lake. That's where I'm coming from with this application. My other options on this, I could turn it over to the town. I don't know if the town would like some pieces of property, but if we turned it over to the town, I'm sure it becomes parkland and everybody in town now knows there's going to be a public beach on Nettie Lake, and they can go out and there's no control on who goes out there with their trailer and parks on a piece of this public property now. And what kind of garbage collection is going to be on. The town, I'm sure, doesn't want that liability. Somebody going out to the lake and starting a campfire and possibly having a campfire getaway and burn cottages or surrounding lands. I'm willing to take any questions, concerns, if anybody has any questions about it. Do you have any questions, sir?
Just one comment. I do agree with you on the septic systems. I think the world has changed as far as septic systems as to what they were 50, 60 years ago. I don't think that's the major concern out there. I think it's the water quality, oxygen, phosphorus levels, and replenishing of the water flow back into the lake. I think those are the main concerns. I don't personally, from what I'm hearing, and I do agree with you on the septic systems, because they have improved drastically. Councillor Owen?
In terms of restricting the type of watercraft that can use the lake, that is a federal matter. That is not something that comes back to the municipal level. The federal government has control of the waterways. If you want that changed, you have to go to the federal government, and you will face an uphill battle. But it's your battle to fight if that's the route you want to go. As a municipality, we can't restrict gas-powered watercraft from using that lake. That's not within our authority to do that. So I just want to throw that out because I know that's an issue that's of concern, but the municipality is not the level to address that.
Yeah, the one where we did have some influence, but you're correct, Councillor Owens. For example, the Gull Lake, where our water supply comes from, it is restricted, but that was authorized through the Temiskaming Health Unit because it's a water supply to the households. It would be very difficult to put straight across the board ban all motorized marines equipment, pleasure craft on that lake. I don't think we don't have the authority. I have to agree.
Okay, well, I appreciate your input on that. Again, it was originally part of the subdivision agreement that was supposed to have been put in place. So I'm not sure of the understanding of how that was supposed to have happened, but it was. I know there are some lakes in Muskoka that do restrict boats, since that's our motorized watercraft, and I'm not looking to ban all watercraft, but you know, as Mr. Kenny indicates in his report, and it is an extremely good report, that is the cause of most of the pollution that's causing problems on the lake right now.
I'd like to go back just to one other item, and that's to do with the parkland. Do these lots, are they part of the existing parkland today?
They are zoned parkland, but they are not part of any park. They are privately owned, and they are zoned parkland.
Okay. If this was approved, is there really 5% parkland still available or out there? I don't know.
I don't know. I was not part of the original subdivision agreement. My understanding was that the town received their portion that was required by the government to meet the subdivision requirements, which I'm assuming would have been the proper amount. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been turned over to us. It would, you know, it was turned over to the town to meet the subdivision plan requirements. So that's what I'm going by.
Okay. I think then that's something we should verify.
'Cause I know there's at least 3 large blocks as well as other amounts around the lake, and that was a requirement.
Okay. Councillor Adams?
Yep, only just to clarify the restrictions of vessels, the municipality is the one that does start the resolution, and it's a formal request put into the local authority. We do our homework and we put in the application to the federal government. So we can start that process if that's something that we want to do.
We
So it
can
is an
recommend it, but we can't approve it.
option. If we do our homework, Muskoka can do it.
That's basically what Councillor Owen's saying. I agree. Thanks for clarifying. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We will now open this to the public. We do have a regular council meeting after this, so I would ask people stick to the subject, make your point. When you do get up, please identify yourself and your address, please.
My name is Ray Kenny. I've got a cottage.
Ray, can you use the mic because we're recording our council meetings?
No. Can you? Okay, good. Again, my name is Ray Kenny. I'm a cottage owner on Nettie Lake. I'm also an environmental troubleshooter, so I deal with wastewater, but a lot of what I do crosses over to these water quality issues. So when Rob came to see me, I thought it'd be a good idea to go out there and do my own dissolved oxygen survey. And I won't get into too many details, but on the west side of the bay, you can see that, or the west side of the small part of the lake, you can see that the water quality was not very good. Now, I want to make this clear in terms of the water quality. Just like Rob said, the water quality is not good. And I think what we have to remember is that fish need oxygen, and so do people. And what I'm seeing out in the lake is that once you, and this is based on the blue heron results, and comparing it to 1978 or 79 when the MNR did their work, what we're seeing is that when you get down to halfway down the lake, so approximately 10 meters, we see the oxygen start to go down considerably. For example, they talk about the rainbow trout needing 7 milligrams per liter of oxygen. The levels of oxygen out there in 2016, when they start to drop down past the 10-meter mark, the levels are going down to 4 at about 10.5, 11 meters, and it's not too much deeper than that. The dissolved oxygen levels go down to about 1.78. There is no fish that I'm aware of that will survive at those type of oxygen concentrations. So that's a concern. I also want to go back to 1979 for the results for the MNR conducted. And what I want to make a comment on that is that dissolved oxygen is dissolved oxygen, and the testing they used in 1978 and 1979
are similar to the technology that's out today. And I know that because I was working back then and I'm working with the equipment today. So I don't have any doubt in terms of the validity of the results from the M&R study that was done in 1978. M&R also did another study in 1999. They didn't go and they didn't check it at the levels below the surface, or they did do the levels below the surface, but that data seems to be lost. But their results show in 1999 those levels were averaging about 5 on an average basis. And in 2016, we're down to about 3.78 milligrams per liter of oxygen. So those oxygen levels are quite low. I want to give you an indication of the concern I have for the water quality. Rainbow trout are stocked in the lake. We can't seem to find rainbow trout. I've been doing an informal survey asking the residents around the lake if they've seen any or caught any rainbow trout, and the answer is no, they haven't, even though it's been stocked. And the rainbow trout live for about 4 to 6 years. So I would expect that the rainbow trout should be healthy enough that we'd be able to find them. The point I want to make about the rainbow trout is that in industry and municipalities, there's a test that we do for rainbow trout. And the reason we do a test for rainbow trout to test the water quality is because it's widespread across the country and it has sensitivities to toxicity. And although it's not a scientific a test in Nettie Lake, what we're finding is that we don't have any there. And that's a concern. So it's kind of like a big test that's going on in Nettie Lake right now in relation to the rainbow trout, because I can relate that back to Environment Canada. So those oxygen levels are going down, and they're probably going to go down more so in the upcoming future compared to what they were back in 1978. And also, it was the Ministry of Natural Resources wrote a letter, which I just got a copy of recently, which I was not aware of. And what the Ministry of Natural Resources said in 1978, that lake was way over capacity in terms of water quality, boating capacity, and lakeside capacity. So they were very clear back then. And I don't think it's improved that much since then. So I'm not looking at it from a political point of view. I'm just looking at it from a scientific, technical review that there are issues in that lake that need to get addressed. Now, in 1978, these personal watercraft, these Sea-Doos that are out there, unheard of. They invented them about 1968, 1970. So they were an exotic item in 1978, and there weren't any on most lakes in this country, and they weren't at a very high, there weren't very many of them out there. And what we know about these personal watercraft is that the brand new ones that have come out since 2006, 2017 are of a type that for every hour of operation, they're discharging about 1 liter of fuel per hour of operation. The older ones from, let's say from 2005 and older, they're dumping in about 10 to 15 liters. And that's directly responsible. There may be other factors involved, but that's directly helping to contribute to the low dissolved oxygen conditions in that lake. Because what happens is that these petroleum products, the gasoline, becomes a food for bacteria. Bacteria in the lake need oxygen, and they draw it out of the water. The bacteria that grow, which means we have more bacteria, settle down at the bottom, they turn anaerobic, and they start producing more compounds that suck oxygen out of the water, including hydrogen sulfide. Now, normally we see hydrogen sulfide in all our lakes across the country, but it's when the concentrations start to get higher that starts to have an impact in terms of toxicity in the lake and in terms of the users on the lake, because I know that I have found that in the water you can smell the hydrogen sulfide. And I know what it smells like because I work with it considerably. So those are some of the issues that I have. And again, I'm just looking at it from a technical point of view, a Rob Lang said that the new septic systems will not discharge any pollutants into the lake. I agree. I know the technology has improved. But the problem is, it's the crowding on the lake. The more users on the lake, the more likely it is that we're going to get more pollutants discharged. And the thing to remember about Nettie Lake, it's a headwater lake, meaning there's no water that runs into the lake except for during the spring runoff and maybe when it rains a little bit, or a lot actually. And they also refer to it as a pothole. And I thought that's a pretty apt description of the lake. It's a pothole. And that says magnitudes to me, because it means that it's basically a big aquarium, and in that aquarium, there's no inputs of fresh water running through. So what we do in that lake has ramifications for years ahead of us. So I might not be around in 10, 15, or 20 years, but your children and your grandchildren will be. So we've got to look at what we can do to protect the lake from ongoing. And the other thing to remember is that I did a dissolved auction survey earlier, I think it was August 31st, which showed that there were issues in the lake then. Last winter was the best winter, and not in my estimation, but in terms of what the MNR is saying, because we've had so much snow, we had so much meltwater that's running in, and that's been great for Nettie Lake because it's an infusion of fresh water in the lake, and not only is it fresh, but it's cold. Cold is good. Fresh is good. More water is good. And the concern I have in the longer term, and maybe even in the shorter term, is what's going to happen with our climate. There are people who say in terms of climate change, forget it right now because we may be too late on our fossil fuel emissions, but we've got to plan ahead. What can we do to protect our lakes? And that's something that the town's got to consider, is what can we do to protect the lakes? Because with climate change, we're seeing some very big changes that are occurring in our climate in terms of increases in temperature. For example, Alaska, which is still fighting some big forest fires, and in the Yukon. The scientists in Alaska are saying that the water temperature increases they're seeing are what they predicted in 55 years from now. So their models have to be thrown out the window because they're not there anymore. Example again, France, this past summer, 22 or 23 days where they exceeded the daily maximum temperature. Where I want to get back to this is that if we don't escape what Alaska is experiencing and what Europe has been experiencing, we're going to be in trouble. It's only Eastern North America that has been protected, for whatever reason, from these extreme temperatures, high temperatures that we're seeing elsewhere around the world. If we get a change in climate and we don't get the snowfall that we had last winter, and we typically do get a fair amount of snow in Kirkland Lake in northern Ontario, if we don't get that snowfall, we're not going to get the meltwater, we're not going to get the refreshment. And if the climate does increase, that's going to result in lower oxygen levels in the lake. Cold water is great because it's easier to transfer oxygen into the cold water as opposed to the warm water. So if it warms up, we've got more trouble. So again, I'm just looking at it from a technical aspect, and those are some of my concerns.
Is there any man-made way of fixing Nettie Lake? I mean,
Well,
you're a troubleshooter, so I don't know. I'm just
yeah,
asking.
okay, good question. I've asked that question in systems that I work with. What can we do to fix it up? Well, you can add oxygen to the lake. There are some lakes.
Is that feasible?
No.
Okay. So it's
There-
not.
Either a natural type of addition of oxygen or adding liquid oxygen.
Yeah, but it's not feasible.
You'd be
Okay.
broke in 2 days of doing that.
Okay.
You know, that's not feasible. So what we have to,
Is there a natural way of, I mean, I understand the
you-
Sea-Doo thing. Is that the only solution, is to,
cross your fingers and hope for 5 more winters like we had last winter.
oh my God, no.
You don't like that? I don't like that either. That would help. You see, and the other problem is that we do get the lake turning over in the fall, but these bacteria that are down there are sucking out the oxygen. Some of those bacteria come to the surface, but because it's basically a stagnant lake, after the turnover, it goes back down. So every year we build up those levels of these oxygen compounds that are sucking oxygen out of the lake.
My sense is you should have all of these people coming to council saying, we want to restrict watercraft there that are simply kayaks and canoes and no motorized vehicles. And if you get those people coming here asking us for that, I think we would probably approach the federal government and try and stop it
Well,
on your behalf.
If you don't, I don't want to be.
I'm just
You're-
saying that's what you should be doing.
Right,
as
right.
opposed
I
to-
don't want to fear monger, but right now that column halfway down, you're very oxygen compromised. 5 years, 10 years, that level is going to get higher and higher. And we know that's happening in a really hot summer. Last year was a hot summer. There was a fish kill report on Nettie Lake. Not to the MNR, but to the residents around the lake, that was observable. So what happens when it gets hot like that? Just like I said before, the oxygen is not transferring into the water. The fish have nowhere to go. And when they have nowhere to go, that's it.
You know what? I want to thank you for coming here.
Good evening. I'm Ann Comita, and I'm a resident of Nettie Lake. And most of my questions actually have been answered tonight, so I'll be quick, or have been asked, not necessarily answered, but I'll be quick. One of my first questions is I've learned that the data used for the Blue Heron environmental study was gathered approximately 15 to 18 years ago. And my question is how can data that's dated be used for a situation that is current? My other question is that given the fact that if the zoning amendment is approved, there'll be clear potential of development on the 4 lakefront properties and the 2 properties that are accessed via Pine Tree Road. And with that development, the ground conditions and vegetation can be significantly altered. And how is it possible that data can be used to be able to support development that would currently take place? The development would significantly alter the drainage of surface water and ultimately the conditions of the lake water that are so very important to the water quality and the fish and the wildlife habitat. My other question is does with the original subdivision agreement, there was a certain percentage of area dedicated as parks and open space, and the question also was already answered, was with these lots being developed or rezoned, will that portion be still supported? Will the requirement still be met? Presently, there are 4 privately owned properties that are designated or that have the same designation of parks and open space. When we purchased our property, we were told that because that property was designated as parks and open space, no development could take place on that property. It was never indicated that if you did want to be able to go forward and do anything such as build an accessory building on the property, that you'd be able to go through a rezoning process. If those 6 properties that are being considered this evening or in the future, would that designation change for the 4 privately owned properties that are zoned as being open space and parkland? My other question is, does the official plan support the reduction of these this designated areas being parks and open space? My other question is it specific to the properties that are accessed on Pine Tree Road? Currently, the permanent residents pay for the road maintenance and snow removal, and we're not asking for the town to pick that up by any means, but we would like to know if the town is looking at perhaps maybe changing that, policy to also include the the seasonal people to, chip into that cost. Increased traffic will require increased, road maintenance, and, why should it be just dedicated to, one group of people? Why wouldn't it be, for all the users of that side of the lake? My other, question is regarding the trailers. And, trailers, at this point in time, you don't need a building permit to have a trailer on a property. Usually if you build a permanent or semi-permanent house, you have to have a septic system in place. Trailers, you don't have to have that. And, there's no regulation as to how to police what happens with the person's gray water, whether an outhouse is being used by those people using trailers, because, you have to take into consideration how are they dumping, their holding tanks and things like that. Is the town going to look at maybe regulating the use of trailers? And you'd like to be able to say, well, it's not gonna happen because, it's not the zone. But it is happening. And, it's a cheap way of having a cottage. And so will the town somehow implement that, regulate it, maybe perhaps, put a requirement that you have to have some sort of a permitting and require that a person put in a septic system? Trailers aren't taxed, not the same way a permanent house is. So at this point in time, a person could have a vacant lot, put a beautiful travel trailer on the property, and, still only pay for a vacant lot. So those are my concerns about this, because you are going to have increased development, increased use, and, I understand, from the viewpoints of the lands that they are paying for taxes for open space that they can't technically use. But there are a lot of considerations that have to be taken into the situation, before a decision is made. And I thank you very much for considering, the concerns that I brought forward.
Thank you. Do we have any other residents wishing to speak? Kathy Whalen?
Hi, my name is Kathy Whalen, and my family are the Culhanes, and my grandparents built a cottage before I was born on Nitty Lake, and I'm 56, so quite some time ago. I've noticed changes on the lake. I grew up on the lake. We have a seasonal cottage. And I'm not gonna address the motorboat issue. I think that's not the only issue affecting the lake, and I say that as coming from a family that has never had a motorized boat on the lake. We have canoes, we have kayaks, we have a lot of inflatables, we have a rubber dam. We don't have motorized vehicles. My experience growing up at that lake was we could drink the water out of the lake when I was a kid. I know this because we had a well. My grandmother sent samples in of the well and of the lake. It was drinkable. So it's not, there are multiple things that cause poor water quality, and losing shoreline is one of them. And I haven't heard any concerns about the wildlife out at the lake. I think many of us in this room could attest to the fact that we're not seeing the wildlife. The bay they're proposing to develop is beside the fireman's cottage, next to our cottage. The blue heron nests in there. We have one family of loons left on the lake. They nest in there. You disrupt that shore, you disrupt their habitats as well. And I think in 2019, that's something we should be concerned about as far as the environment. I haven't heard anything being a benefit to developing any more land on an at-capacity lake that I remember my grandmother saying. She had heard a ministry report that there should have been 8 seasonal cottages on that lake. Now look at the numbers we have. There's a lot of traffic on that lake. This is going to increase traffic. It's going to decrease shoreline. In the original agreement, this was designated for a reason. This land was designated that way. Nothing that I can see is going to improve by having more development on this lake. There's a lot of things that are going to get worse. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andy Stevens. I'm also in the Culhane family, the Whalen family. I happen to be the Stevens side. We have a major concern about the changes. You've heard lots of discussion of what's happened with the wildlife, what's happened with the water quality. And I came here as a young fella to go to Northern College and was lucky enough to meet Sharon and attend the cottage there. And as we remember how different it was then, it was remote, it was colorful, we had lots of wildlife, people used to hunt partridge and used to do all that sorts of things. That's changed gradually, but it's gone. So when we were there today, because we came from Wawa especially for this meeting, which is about a 6-7 hour drive, because it's important not only to us, but it's a family cottage. We don't call it our cottage, it's a family cottage. We come here as a family, the Culhanes, the Whalens, the Stevens, our kids and their kids. And that's what we wanted to keep trying. We want that tradition to continue because over the years we spread out. We're no longer just in one or two places. Our family is extended now. We have a cousin in BC. We have other family in Wawa, Mississauga, Sault Ste. Marie. So it's an opportunity for us to come, to gather, and to enjoy each other. But it's harder and harder when that land, the water, is deteriorating in quality. And as you say, what are we going to have for our grandchildren? And I heard the Lang family say they're paying taxes. Now, if you look at it, that was public property at one time, in the sense it was government land. Those are most likely patent and mining claims. On that mining claim, it's as if you own the land. They own the mining or the mineral rights to that, and they may still own that, I'm not sure. Also, in those days, you had benefits, been able to sell trees in that. When that subdivision was developed, that land was sold. And I'm sure that went to Dolores family at that time. So over the period of time, there was property developed, and you require a zoning plan, and it was developed and approved through different municipalities and ministries. At that time, our families bought into that. So at one time, we put an outlay to the Dolores or the Lang family for that advantage to have that property. Before that, it was leased land. We used to lease the land from them, but at a time when the zoning was done, we were then able to buy the property and have security. Anybody that's been on the lake knows there's a large venture on that. Every year or every few years, you're putting more capital to maintain and enjoy the property. So although I can appreciate the concern of having to pay taxes on, we call it vacant land, you have to recognize there's a long history. And in the past, the Dolores family were able to develop it and we benefited from it. We like to see those benefits continue to the future generations. And I'd like to thank council for their interest and their participation in this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Do we have any other comments? Cesar?
My name is Cesar Forero. I live in 63 Pine Tree Road. Everything that I wrote here has already been said, so I don't need to read it, but Joanne has a copy of it, and I would like to get the distribution of the copy. The only thing that I want to say is that we had a meeting over the weekend, and we did agree that we don't want more motorboats in the lake, and we are willing to start and do anything that we need to do to try to start the process and make an impact. That if this was implemented in the Muskokas, we would like to make anything that is possible to make it implemented here in Nettie Lake as well. That's all. So I leave you my time.
Thank you.
Actually, the question is for Rick from Planscape. And then, Rick, can you tell us what the process would be to get federal permission to ban personal watercraft, or, but really it's personal watercraft that I'm most interested in, not the party boats, not the people with 10 horsepower motors going around the lake, but those personal watercraft. How does that process start?
Part of the municipality has to share, if you want to Transport Canada, the local authorities guide, if anyone wants to notes, you just go there. It comes down to municipality, going through the whole process. They provide the guide to you. Biggest part is the feedback from the municipality, right? So it's
Okay.
constituents, so you have a band together, get it all going, from the council, we begin the process. We direct staff to begin it, and then as long as everything is kosher, they provide the whole guide as to what we need to do as a municipality.
Okay.
And
Okay, just a show of hands, would anyone object to not having the personal watercrafts on the lake? Okay.
I'm not really sure, I read your list of things that you went through in terms of the Blue Yard project. I'm not entirely sure where you cited your information for in terms of where that statistic comes from about leaching gas into lakes like that.
University of Vermont.
Vermont. Okay. I read a
University.
similar
You can
study
look it up.
online, and the thing that I saw was that was it had to do with two-stroke engines, not four, so every seasonal lake.
Four-stroke
currently is a
engines,
four-stroke.
the four-stroke engines are discharging a liter an hour.
Well,
The older technology is discharging 10 to 15 liters an hour.
okay, perfect.
So
I'm
the
just
newer
curious how
ones
the
are
change
1
in
liter an
thought.
hour. That's not insignificant in a stagnant lake.
Excuse me. Only one person can talk, and that's the person at the mic.
Okay,
If, okay.
that's okay.
If you wish to make comments, please come
That's
up to
okay,
the
and
mic.
the other part of my question, or my concern, is that if the town of Kirkland Lake doesn't come up with restrictions for trailer parks, the more trailers you have, the more crowding that you have, the more crowding you have, the more watercraft, the problem gets worse. And the other thing to remember too is that when it gets hot, then this summer was not a hot summer because of climate change, believe it or not, what happened last winter. But as the lake becomes more crowded and the temperatures increase and we get those hot days of 30 degrees, then we get more water traffic compared to what we get in this what we've had in this past summer. So, and I can understand the people that have the personal watercraft, their concerns, because if they have a property on the lake, I don't know how much they cost, but they're quite expensive, I'm sure. So that is a concern for them. I can understand that, but I'm also looking at it in terms of the water quality as we're going forward. At what point do we decide enough is enough? Is it when you turn on your water taps at the cottage and you smell hydrogen sulfide coming up every day? Or not?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Wes Oliver. I'm a resident of Nettie Lake. I want to bring up a couple of points or a couple of concerns that I don't think have been raised to this point in the discussion. One is that I believe, I've only been in Nettie Lake for about a year now, so I can't speak to fact, but I believe there are certain zone cottage lots on the lake that currently are vacant and are not developed. Does the report or does any of the studies take into consideration permits that have already been issued for seasonal houses that are in the planning of being built, or future homes or seasonal residences that could be built on these lots that are already zoned? And my second concern is that you speak to the federal as controlling the motor traffic on the lake. However, I do believe that the town controls the public launch. We live on the east side of the lake, and one thing we've noticed is that there are a number of young people coming out with Sea-Doos parking in the public launch, and before the time that go out, you know, sometimes later at night, and they'll buzz around the lake and play around sometimes till after dark, 10 o'clock at night. They'll circle the loons. We see people fall off their sea-doos. They'll circle the people and have fun and try to cover them in waves, which is a safety concern. But I'm not trying to be selfish with the lake. I would welcome everybody to come out if they wanted to launch a canoe and go for a canoe ride or take a paddleboat ride. But this lake is being used as a personal background pond for people that don't live on the lake. And like I said, it's not that I don't want people using the lake. I'm not selfish that way. But to launch 4 Sea-Doos at nighttime and to go buzzing around the lake and then to pack up at the end of the night is, that's traffic that hasn't been discussed or considered here. And as the town grows, as the mine grows, you have people with work in the mine that have expendable cash. They'll buy the Sea-Doos, the boats, and this is where they're spending their recreational time. So this is adding to the pollution of the lake. And I don't know what control the town has over the launch, but is it something you can consider maybe making the launch only accessible or letting boats in that are only, maybe it's people on the lake that can have boats, but everybody else can just use it for canoes or something that's not environmentally friendly. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Yeah, just to answer your questions or comment on it, I have to agree with you, in all honesty, and it's not this council, it's for many years. We haven't taken the lead on the lake and the planning out there. So that's why we are in the condition of the lake that we are right today. And I agree, we have to show the lead, take the lead, and have more policies and bylaws in place out there. Because as I'm hearing from a lot of the residents, it's getting like the Wild West. So with boats and Sea-Doos and whatnot.
Well, other observations I've made, and I don't want to go on about something that's unrelated to the issue, but you have 300 horsepower Sea-Doos doing 120 kilometers an hour on a 1 kilometer long lake. Yeah. So not to mention numerous other safety issues that we've observed, but and to add, my wife and my kids and myself, for most of the summer, don't feel comfortable taking the canoe out with all the traffic that's on the lake. And for the record, my family has chosen not to have a motorized vehicle. We only have a canoe and a kayak. And that's the approach that we would like to take.
Thank you. Councillor Owens?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Sea-Doos. Trust me, I'm not going to argue on the science because I'm certainly not a scientist. I have to accept the expertise that's presented at the meeting. If you have problems with Sea-Doos, I suggest you call the OPP and ask for more patrols. Myself, my passion is photographing wild birds. So I'm out on Lake Sessakinnica on well, as long as the weather's good, because it's very difficult to photograph from a boat with a long lens. And I don't appreciate Sea-Doos coming along and scaring away the birds. But I don't deny them the right to be on the lake. They have a legal right to be there. I do not own Lake Sessakinnica because I have a property on the lake front. The lake is public property. If there is a problem, then I suggest you take your concerns to the OPP as a starting point. Now, if it's like Lake Sessakinnica, as soon as the OPP show up, everybody's on their cell phone and things calm down. But if they show up often enough, it's likely those people that are causing the problems are going to find another lake. I am quite shocked by the figures presented by Mr. Kenny concerning the amount of gasoline that goes into the lake. That to me was quite shocking. I had no idea that when I'm out shooting birds, I'm putting, sorry, I use the term shoot, I mean photographing birds, that I'm putting that much. Now, mind you, my Lake Susquehannock is a much bigger lake. It's not a headwater. I think in Nettie Lake, the pollution concerns are probably very real because of the fact that it's a headwater and it's a small lake. But my family had a cottage on Lake Couchiching for about 60 years. And one of the things that I found interesting about that was that lakes go through natural life cycles in terms of fish life, wildlife that's in the lake and around the lake. So part of what you make, and I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying in a non-scientific way, part of what you might be seeing is part of a natural cycle. I mean, you have predators and you have prey. Your predators go up when the prey is big and they decline when the prey is not there. But I think that the concern over the water quality is very real. In terms of the trailer park, I think you have some very realistic concerns. I have some questions that I would like staff to answer. Was that a pre-existing non-compliance? Now, I talked to a person who did go to the health unit this year and did request the health unit look into the septic system at the trailer park. I have friends that are members of the Knights of Columbus and do have trailers out there, and there was work done. I don't know the specifics of the work. And the person that went to the health unit also confirmed to me that there was some work done out there. But I definitely agree that if we legally can, we should be putting a limit as to how many trailers can be on that site. I think it's a pre-existing thing that we can't eliminate. So I'm not sure if we can limit the number of trailers. So I think it's something that the town should look into for the residents in Nettie Lake.
When the Ministry of Environment did inspect the existing septic system, they did require that they replace it and what the capacity was to bring it within capacity. It was offside slightly, but it is now back on track. And they did put a new system in. I believe they cost them $20,000. But they certainly took action, and a credit to the Knights as well.
As you have said, and as a reporter I often discuss in the office of the Northern News, we've dropped the ball out there many years ago.
True.
And I think one of the areas that we dropped the ball was the trailer park. And I could see that having a very big negative impact on the quality of the water. So I would like staff to do up a report about how many trailers there are, if we can do anything to limit the number of trailers, and perhaps get a report back from the health unit, because that's the people that supervise the septic system, and see what the capacity that they put in for, whether it matches up to the number of trailers that are there, so that as a council, we can be assured that it's in compliance with regulations. And we won't know till we get the research done.
Okay.
Our family's been on the lake since '72.
I'm sorry, name and address?
2 Delay Crescent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so actually my property is right beside one of these green zones. I'm not sure, maybe I didn't hear it right, but was the Knights of Columbus mentioned as one? I'm sorry, sir. I don't know your name, but one lot. But, so if there's, I'm not sure the number, you said they're 40 or 50. Yeah. Couldn't that be 40 or 50 boats seated, possibly?
Well, that would depend on the docking facilities at the Knights facility. I don't know what the facilities are there, so I can't answer that.
No, but your study says it's one. The lot, all those people are counted as one.
That's correct. The lake capacity study that was done by Blue Heron had it listed as one lot and not as a lot with 55 trailers on it, or 50 trailers.
Yeah, so
That's correct.
Not a very good.
It should be accounted for. It needs to be accounted for as far as what that impact is, which I think the mayor has mentioned.
You can have 52 strokes on there, 5,200 horsepower motors. Or more?
Yeah.
Basically, that's, I just wanted. Oh, maybe, I don't know what the number is. It's probably 40 anyway.
Well,
Because visually from the lake, it's a lot. I don't know the exact number.
do you know the numbers, Ashley? Because we did have them.
I don't want to quote yes or no. I don't think this is working, but I don't want to quote the numbers because I don't know off the top of my head. What I do know is that there was issues with the Knights of Columbus with the septic system, and we were at the step where we were going to end up moving over to MECP. The ministry was going to get involved because they were potentially over the 10,000 liters per day. So we had both Temiskaming Health Unit and the Ministry of Environment looking at that site to ensure compliance. Like you said, they were able to create a new septic system, so 2 septic systems at, let's say, 5 liters or 5,000 liters per day, so they could get away from hitting over and above the 10,000 liters per day. All is in compliance right now. We did another check again at the beginning of the year because there was some concern. We had the health unit go and do another site visit, and there was no new development that was created on that property, so there was no concern. So I do know as of this year, as of spring, which is the last time I've dealt with it, everything was in compliance.
I just don't think
But-
they should be counted as one. Because, like I said, they can bring 50 boats or 40 boats, however many people there are. They could be 2 strokes. They could be 200 horsepower.
Yeah, but I agree with Councillor Owen. We need to find out the numbers to make sure it is within compliance.
Now, even if it's 30 or 25.
It does add to what I agree
They
with what.
shouldn't be one. It's just
Yeah.
not a fair, it's not accurate.
Okay.
Also,
Appreciate
I have this pontoon boat that I've decided before this meeting I'm going to convert to electric. So I'm going to have the first green pontoon boat on Ready.
Councillor Owens?
It's a 2-stroke.
Evinrude still makes a 2-stroke that meets the environmental regulations, by the way. I have another question about the trailer park, and that is, how big is that lot? Because we're talking 40 or 50 trailers. And I apologize to the people in Nettie Lake. It's not a lake I go to regularly. I was to the fireman's cottage one time at night, and I was in no condition to really look at the lake when I left. I was out once or twice in the daytime, but basically just at the fireman's cottage, so I'm not, other than the fact that I know it's a very small lake, I'm not real familiar with it. But I would like to know the size of the Knights of Columbus lot, because it sounds like 40 to 50 trailers, and I've seen the size of the lake. Seems extremely, extremely high concentration of people. I don't know, but I'd like to know the size and the size of the lot and exactly how many trailers are there, and what legally we can do to restrict the number of trailers that can go on that lot. I don't know if we can, because if it's an existing variance, I'm not sure that's something that our planner would have to look into, I think, or maybe she knows the answer right now, I don't know.
I can give you a little bit. So I will go back and get a report ready for you regarding the size of the lots and where things sit right now, just so that there's that general understanding around the table. But what is restricted, right now, it's not restricted from a zoning perspective, it's restricted from a Temiskaming Health Unit perspective. So if one new trailer goes on there, my understanding is that they're over that 10,000 liter capacity. So then they would get involved to take over. So it's not a planning, it's more of a Ministry of Environment.
What could the system handle? It was basically it, and that was dictating how many trailers and that, yeah.
Yeah, but I will get a report ready, and I will make sure that you guys have that necessary information. No problem.
Hi, I'm Mike Pulley, and I also reside on Nettie Lake. To answer your question, Rick, I think they had to put in another septic system in there, right?
They
A
did.
tank? So, to allow for the number of trailers that are being placed on there. But I'm not too sure how the numbers are, but
When the residents were talking about the boat traffic and everything, that's more where I was raising the question about the number of trailers that are there. Because like I say, I know little about Nettie Lake, except I've seen it, and it's very small. And if you've got 40 or 50 trailers there, that's a heck of a lot of traffic on a very small lake. And aside from the pollution part, because I'm not a scientist, I just have to accept what I'm presented with. That's a lot of strain on that lake. And if you're looking at fishing, you know, if they fish, well, I used to say that about Lake Couchiching too, but I was just told today there is fish there, so I'm not sure. It may have been me. But if they fish, that's a lot of pressure on the fish population as well. So there's a number of concerns I have about it.
I've caught fish there, but just in the fall, when after the stock, when the ministry goes and stocks it, I've caught fish in November and December. We've been there, wife and I, for 11 years now, and we have not caught anything in the summer. Trout sink, so if anybody perceives they found fish alongside the lake, I don't think so, because trout sink when they die. So there's no way of telling how many fish there are in there, but anyway, I have a couple concerns. Getting back to the lots on the east side of Nettie. There's 4 tributaries coming down into the lake. I call them tributaries. It's runoff. My concern is there's 2 dwellings that are potentially being sold by the Langs, and those tributaries fall into where they would build their homes. So, you know, you have 4 tributaries, which is runoff off the east side of Nettie Lake. Where would these tributaries be rerouted if you're going to build right where they're going into the lake? Also, to add on to Kathy's point, the migratory birds also do their thing in those bays. I'm just concerned what would happen with those tributaries. Where would you reroute those tributaries? Like, that's where they flow. And both spots is where they want to put their lots for sale on the lake, besides the 2 back ones on the west end of the lake. So that's a big concern of mine, because that's where our runoff is going. Would it wash out our roads? And then they want to also put property on the east side of Nettie Lake, on the east side of our road. So, and that's all coming from there. All the runoff's coming from the east side of the road. So what would they do with that? My other question is, why all of a sudden are they wanting to sell 4 lots on Nettie Lake? All of a sudden, what's to tell us that, sorry, they own the island on Nettie Lake. There's an island on Nettie Lake, and they own that island. What's to tell us that once they sell their lots, that they're not going to sell the island and say bye-bye, the hell That's my concerns. They don't live here, they live out of town. So, you know, they might have a, you know, a brother or nephew or something, or I'm not too sure what, you know, their family, so. But what's to, you know, say that, well, we've got our lot sold. Let's sell our island and the hell with the water. That's my concerns.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Mike Romaine, 876 Gummer Road West. I do not live at Netier. I very, very seldom go there. I did as a kid, 30 years ago. I had great fun with the 9.9, driving around Nettie Lake. It was awesome. I believe Rob said the best thing he could have said tonight in his speech: hand the property back to the town. That'll stop any more development for these people. It won't save the lake, but it'll help it. And I believe the town can put something there that says that that property cannot be used privately or publicly. My question that I have is for Ray. With your oxygen testing, are all the lakes in the area doing the same? Or is it specific to Nettie Lake?
To give you an idea, the Ministry of Natural Resources uses a 7.0 milligrams per liter of oxygen as an average. So again, the Ministry of Natural Resources uses the lake trout oxygen level of 7.0 as an indicator of what that level should be within the lake. And a pristine lake will have 7 milligrams per liter from just about the bottom to the halfway point, and then up to about 9. So if you use that as an indicator, that's what most of the lakes should be at, is at 7.0. So, and like I was saying, is that there's a big toxicity test going out there at Nettie Lake. And I have a lot of experience with rainbow trout toxicity, and what we're seeing is that we're failing.
Okay, we can't debate between residents or...
So that's, my opinion is, I believe that Rob should hand the property back to the town, and the town should look into something to stop other users from using that section.
Yep, thank you. Okay, you'll be the last presenter.
That picture you're showing, I don't think it's accurate at all. I think it's light. No, it doesn't seem right.
I believe the picture was put up just to give a visual representation of the lot when Councillor Owen was asking. It's not about an accuracy of the numbers on there. That's not the point.
Okay, it looks like, I think maybe council should count them.
We're gonna look at giving direction to staff.
So I have a resolution here that is moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacy White. The council receives the report from Planscape concerning the rezoning application for property located on Nettie Lake, Pine Tree Road, and Sandy Drive, and that council has heard public comments and has received written documentation from members of the public concerning the same, and that council directs the CAO to direct staff and the planning consultant to do further research and prepare a recommendation report for consideration at a future meeting.
Any comments? All in favor? Unanimous, passed.
It's moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Stacy White, that council adjourn its special meeting of September 17th, 2019 to a regular meeting of council.
All in favor? There'll be, there will be 5 minutes at least. We want to be out before 9 a.m. Do you think Deloitte will still think?
I think we're gonna get the D tomorrow. I don't know.
Welcome to the General Council meeting of September the 17th, 2019. We'll have a moment of silence. Approval of the agenda.
It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacy White. The council approves the agenda for its regular meeting of September 17th, 2019, with the addition of an item by the clerk, which will be the notice of upcoming confidential meetings.
All in favor? Unanimous. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Councillor Owen?
Yes, I declare pecuniary interest on sourcing, oh no, I'm on the wrong agenda?
Yeah.
On the award of a 2 3/4 ton truck to Georgian Chevrolet Buick and the associated bylaw, because my son works for the water department, as does my wife. In regards to the other mention of water department issues here, I just want to make it clear that I do not feel I have a pecuniary interest, because they are just reports of where the budget process is. And if any counselor feels that I do have pecuniary interest in those cases, I will declare and leave the room for that as well. Thank you.
Duly noted. Petitions and delegations?
None, sir.
None. Acceptance of the minutes and recommendations?
It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacy White. The council accepts the minutes of the regular meeting of council held September 3rd, 2019.
All in favor? Unanimous. Reports of municipal officers and communications. We'll start with Councillor Stacy White and Councillor Casey Owens.
Okay, I'll speak really quickly. So what I would like to do, what we would like to do possibly with council permission is start a Kirkland Lake Youth Council Committee. We did use the Municipal Youth Engagement Handbook and creating a youth committee as our outlines and guidelines for what we hope to accomplish by including members of the youth in this community. It would be specific to people under the age of 18. There was a question, or I hope that it would be under the age of 18. There was a question brought to council regarding the term youth and how we would define that, so I will leave that up to my fellow council members if this is passed tonight to include in the terms of reference upcoming. The idea behind this is to get our youth members of the community engaged in not only municipal politics of sitting on a committee, but also in community engagement and engagement with staff and administration, so they may one day feel that working and existing in a town is worth remaining in Kirkland Lake as well. It would be a committee directed committee where they choose to show us where we need to go, as well as any other committee. They would not make decisions for themselves. They would bring recommendations forward to council. for us to decide. I don't know if everybody's read all the information, but if anybody has any questions or statements, I believe Casey has something to add.
I just want to
Councillor
address
Owens.
the definition of youth as to, because we did get that one comment as to open it up to the age group of 25, and I had the opportunity today to discuss with my students in my civics class about this opportunity or this program, and they felt, and I agree with them, that 18 to 25-year-olds have other opportunities to get their voices heard. They can vote, they can run for council, so they have that option, whereas the high school students that we are targeting by this initiative don't have that opportunity, so this would be their way. And some of these kids would not necessarily feel comfortable speaking as openly in front of 25-year-olds as they are amongst each other, so they felt that it would be more appropriate, and I agree with them that this should be kept to a high school level initiative for the time being anyway.
Councillor Owens?
I'll keep it short. I fully support this idea of starting, getting the youth involved. I think it's a great idea.
I'll keep it short, I agree.
So I have a resolution that is moved by Councillor Stacy White, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. That council approves the development and creation of a Kirkland Lake Youth Council Committee to engage young members to learn about municipal governance and administration, and to also take an active role in advising council on issues and opportunities facing their demographic. And that Councillor Stacy White and Councillor Casey Owens take the lead on this initiative and bring forward terms of reference and a list of committee members for consideration.
All in favor? Unanimous? Approved? CAO, Recreation Committee mandate in terms of reference.
Thank you. Last weekend, or the weekend before, sorry, we received a number of letters of concern from the public regarding an issue with the terms of reference and the Recreation Committee. The mayor and I felt it was appropriate to address the issue at council because it is important to address the public concerns and to reassure them things are fine. Okay. Background, Recreation Committee recently invited local fitness facility owners to a meeting scheduled for September 24th. The purpose of the meeting was to gather information that the committee would use to provide council with recommendations on how the complex can adjust their programming to fill the gaps and eliminate duplication of programming. Communication from the committee was unclear as to the opportunity for the public to give input on the topic. Last weekend, the municipality received a series of letters from concerned citizens that the meeting was closed to the public and that private interests were superseding public interest on the issue. Staff and council take this very seriously as we are committed to an open and transparent municipal operation. We're especially sensitive when it comes to the Recreation Committee because in 2017 the Ontario Ombudsman had found the committee contravened the Municipal Act by holding closed meetings without providing proper notice to the public. That lesson was learned and we're committed to not making that mistake again and not being perceived to make it, which is as important or more important in our world. As a result, we added it to the agenda, the goals to explain to the public what's actually happening on the 24th and to reassure them that the public input on the issue is welcome and will be arranged, and to diffuse any future confusion by clarifying the reasoning behind the meeting, which I think is actually good reasoning. First issue is the meeting on the 24th. The mayor and I are confident that the confusion surrounding the meeting is simply a result of simple miscommunication. We had caught it on September 5th and had planned to seek clarification from the councillors on the committee the following week when I returned from Ottawa. The letters from the public came in over the weekend, so that preempted the conversation. As a committee chairman, Steve Cox clarified in an email to me dated September 9th, the public is indeed welcome to attend the meeting on the 24th. The agenda, however, is dedicated to presentations by the private sector in the complex. We leave it to the committee to clarify when and how public input on the topic will be solicited. The second issue, the reasoning behind the September 24th meeting. The committee's mandate as per the terms of reference are to recommend to council ways to support the recreation and sport capacity of the community. Goal, to promote access to recreation, healthy living, active living for all residents. question on eliminating duplication of programming and other cooperation with the private sector between the complex and the private sector is based on a motion that was brought forward to Council on March 5th. Council referred that motion to the Recreation Committee for consideration and was expecting an update in 3 months and a report with recommendations within 6 months. Key points to remember for the public: eliminating program duplication between the public and private sector is not the committee's mandate. It is one topic among many that the committee looks at within the context of its mandate. And that is, again, to support recreation and sport capacity of the community. Other big main point to take back: the private sector input is one factor among many. No subject is considered through only one lens with the municipality. Considerations like accessibility, affordability, needs of specific audiences, client interests, they're also taken into account. And that's why it's important to have public input. Also, the committee is doing research. People have to understand that. They're not setting direction for complex or staff or dictating operations. Whatever they recommend will be presented to council. Council will determine what levels of service a complex should provide according to what it believes is in the best interest of the whole community. There are multiple opportunities for public input throughout that entire process, and we welcome that. So the issue did bring forward some lessons to be learned, especially in terms of managing communications and providing more staff guidance to our committees. We can deal with that. If there is a need for further clarification as to the committee's mandate and role, that's for council to discuss and to debate. But on the issue of September 24th meeting, I think the public can rest assured that the process was open, transparent, and honest in intent. So I just wanted to go through that.
Thank you both. Investing in the Canada Infrastructure Program. Oh, sorry, Councillor Adams.
Okay, so eliminating programming duplication between the public and private sector is not the committee's mandate. The committee was asked to do a service review. Within the councillor's guide of service review, it asked to look at the direct delivery, purchase of services, municipal business corporations, municipal service boards and other local entities, partnerships, licensing, privatization. So that's what they were kind of looking at, is to find those kinds of where we can fill and find partnerships. But also, as well as a key point for this one that is on my shoulders, is that the municipal guide is for senior staff. We gave it to the rec committee because we were in a budget process. So maybe we can rethink why that's happening. But hopefully now with the staff support that is now going to be provided to the rec committee, so hopefully some of these issues can be rectified. But council gave direction to a recreation committee to do a service review. They were only looking at where the duplications are, so you can find partnerships as to where you can fill gaps in the community.
Councillor Owens?
Yeah, it's funny, you know, like for a lot of years, this issue of what we offer and what the private sector offers has been a hot button issue. We finally have a committee of dedicated people that said, hey, let's get all the facts. Let's find out what the private sector is facing. Let's find out what our rec department, let's find duplications. Let's find, you know, people are assuming we're going to cut programs and services. That may not happen. We might find situations where we have to increase programming or services. It was disheartening for me because as a counselor, I think it was unfair to one volunteer who unfortunately didn't understand in the municipal concept what the words he used meant. And that led to a lot of concern in terms of the public. Another concern that was brought forward that really bothered me was private contractors. Well, and the one private contractor said, well, it will impact my business. Well, we've invited the owners of the facilities to come and make a presentation. They not only represent their employees that are under their direct employ, they also represent their employees that are contract employees. If, say, the rec committee decided to recommend to council that a certain program be cut because it's duplicated or it's not used enough, we're not looking at whether it's a contract employee or a town employee. The impact's the same on either one. They would, you know, the person that offers that service would lose their job. So contract employees are represented through who they're contracting through. I'm very proud of the rec committee. I think we have a very strong rec committee. One of the big issues now, we've got the issue of meeting on the same night as council straightened out. I believe. We'll see how that goes. For a while, I thought it was a conspiracy that they didn't want councilors at the meeting, but one of the big issues that we just caught the tail end of, and it was brought up the meeting before, is accommodating people, young people, who cannot afford to pay, and looking into different ways other municipalities have been able to accommodate them, and that will also, in a broad sense, fall into this review. There could be direct costs in terms of the rec department, but there could be long-term savings in terms of policing, social costs, and we would be meeting our mandate of promoting a healthy lifestyle. So I think a lot of the criticism could have been cleared up if the people had just come and asked somebody on the committee first. It certainly was never the intent of anybody on that committee to hold, in terms of the municipality wording, a closed meeting. That meeting was meant to be open to the public from day one, and it was meant to hear from the rec department and the private sector who provide similar or same or different services. And I just want to make that clear. And it's frustrating as a member of that committee to see so much criticism come back to us when we're trying to do the right thing.
Thank you. We'll move on then.
The government came out with one of the very few times where they will actually allocate dollars towards sport, recreation, cultural infrastructure. The timelines on this are fairly close. So we brought, as per council's request, we brought forward a report that highlights some of the areas where the municipality could take advantage of this funding. There are two different streams. One is a major one, and another one is slightly smaller. In the report, made the case for the upgrading of the recreational complex itself, as well as another one would be potentially the museum. Now, in the context of the recreational facility, we have ongoing costs there anyway. If we're keeping the facility, you have to keep upgrading it, you have to keep putting the money into it. This could be a chance to leverage dollars and reduce the burden on the taxpayer. For the museum, the same argument is there. The difference would be that we don't own the museum itself, and that is an issue. It just simply has to be taken into consideration. On this stream number 2, there's a number of different projects that staff have brought forward, everything from walking trails to Civic Stadium. Again, they're put forward for council's consideration. Councilors had said at the time they may also have other ideas that have come to them from the public. So we put this forward. We are asking for direction because the timeline to get a application in is very tight.
Question, well, is there room for the public groups, nonprofit groups, to get in on some of this funding, or is it strictly to the municipality?
The assets for capital projects must be owned by the municipality. I think that there's other opportunities for First Nations in that, but I don't believe that you have the opportunity for a private sector to go through and put an application in, say, for a favored facility or something that's not owned by the municipality.
Okay, because we were at a meeting recently and obviously didn't have all the information with us, and we did mention to a group to look into it. But we'll have to clarify that with them. Councillor Owens?
Now, you used the word owned, which,
Owens, sorry.
no, owned, that the town has to own, which means the museum and the library would not qualify?
I'm not sure about the library. The museum, under the agreement with the Ontario Heritage Trust, may qualify. I did put a call into them, and they said, well, if you have a long-term lease agreement whereby you are responsible for all this, show us the agreement, but it looks like it would. And the library, I'm not as familiar with.
Okay, because in terms of the museum, we keep hearing about how this roof has to be replaced and how expensive it is. And to me, that seems like a much higher priority than expanding a walking trail or adding a playground to civic service or, you know, that kind of thing. And personally, as a counselor, if the museum does qualify, I would think that that would be my priority, because that will preserve the building, preserve the collection, and it's something that has to be done, and we don't have the money to do it. And it has to be done soon, from my understanding.
There are two streams of funding, though. One is for the larger ones, which the museum actually would fall under as well. Is that the stream that you're looking at, or is it the second stream, rehabilitation renovation category, at $5 million? I don't know that we would get $5 million. Our application could go in asking for it, but you are more limited. The other stream, the first stream, does have a greater flexibility to it.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Wilf, it's been a few days since I went through this. We have a percentage that we have to come up with, right?
26 point something percent, yeah.
And I think that's something under our current finances that we must keep in mind.
You do also have an extended period for this project, I think, and so you're operating over that period of time would be able to offset your costs if that's the direction you're going in. As well, there is, and we'll bring back a report on this, there were dollars budgeted in excess for the pool. I think it's about $159,000 roughly, and council that does have to decide what does it want to do with that. Put it in reserve towards future pool maintenance or towards recreational facilities. So there's also dollars there. I agree with what you're saying. I just want to point out that you have more flexibility with this program than a one shot that has to be done quickly. That's all.
You know, I'm not necessarily saying we shouldn't at least look into it, but something we have to remember as a council is that we don't have a lot of money to deal with. And while 26% sounds like a small amount, it still could be a lot of money. And I think as councilors, we should keep that in mind, considering any grants that we're looking at now or in the future.
Can we expect some direction though? Because we will have to put an application in November, and if we're looking for the estimates, that's going to take time. We'll have to spend money on the estimates as well, so.
Councillor White?
As far as direction go, I would like to see us go the route to assist the museum, because it is a critical situation there. And it is a department that has been severely neglected for a long time. It is a very old building, and it needs a lot of repairs. And there is issues with the agreement, we know this. It's an old agreement. If we can get that building up to a certain level, that may have some effects on that agreement as well. So I back Rick on this, that I would like to see our priority be the museum first.
Councillor Owens?
Yeah, I still stick with the museum first, but I'd also like to know if the library qualifies. I think we put a ton of money into recreation already, and I know some of it's maintenance and blah, blah, blah. But I don't think we should do it at the expense of other departments if they can show us that they have a project of need. And my understanding, and I don't know, I haven't talked to anybody from the library, but I understand they have problems with their building as well, with the roof, I believe. But I thought that had been fixed.
That has been fixed, yeah.
But it would be nice to find out if they qualify, and then to find out if, in fact, they have something that would be a project that would benefit the community as well.
We can put that under the first stream, the larger amount, because I think with the museum, especially considering that all workers have to be approved by OHT and be eligible or whatever it is to work under the conservation and heritage stream. For the second stream of the projects that are there, again, Kinross, we will be spending money on fixing Kinross in the very near future. Do we want to try to leverage any of the funding for that? Up to 5 million, I think it was, and yes, but that again, it's spread across the province, so
Yeah.
be realistic on that.
And the old, fixing up the old pool or doing some of that building that's damaged, that would that qualify?
Yes, it would. That's why in the recommendation for the complex, we put down short-term, medium-term, long-term, and our plan would be then to break it out for council as to what each one would comprise, and the old pool as part of the facility would be eligible for within that.
Thank you.
Councillor Owens?
The council hasn't even discussed the old pool, so I'm not sure we should be applying for grant money. I mean, we don't know what we're doing with it.
No, that was why we put it in as part of the overall facility. If you have a chance to get money to do anything, this is the time right now, as the overall facility.
Okay.
That wouldn't give us much time if you were looking at the pool, the old pool, on a major project to get all this done.
Not necessarily. We did have some background work done last year, or 2 years ago now. As well, when they were building the new pool, they did a very good assessment of the facility. So we actually have more information readily available at the complex that can be built on than we do for probably any other facility in town.
So you're comfortable that we'd be able to meet that?
I think it would be very tough. I think the biggest challenge will be in getting the proper estimates in. But it's something that we're used to, and it's probably worth fighting for, that's for sure.
Councillor Owen?
Not to beat a dead horse, we know we have a problem at the museum. I don't really want to make a decision on the second part until we find out whether the library qualifies. Because I don't think it's fair to that department if they qualify, and we're sitting at a table making a decision, we don't even know if they qualify.
They were asked, just so you are aware, and their recommendation was if we could have taken another building and combined the museum and library, that was what they had talked about. They had not mentioned anything on their own building. Yeah.
They were consulted then?
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
Councillor Ivanov?
Fire hall?
Not
Does it
unless you
qualify?
can swing there, play basketball, or do something else, no.
My God.
It's a museum piece, yes. Sorry, Rob.
Okay, so can we have a direction to staff to proceed?
I do have a resolution ready, but we have stream one, which staff is suggesting it either be the renovation, rehabilitation, and upgrades of the complex, or the rehabilitation of the museum. So that, my understanding, is for the big,
That's what we were saying,
yeah,
because
that's the
huge,
big
that's
pot
the
of
problem.
money. Okay, so that's one of the two is the suggestion from staff. Now, the second stream, which we were looking for direction from council, is for the smaller amount of money, which is, I think, the global $5 million pot. So there's these smaller projects that we could probably apply to and get some. So we're looking to council to make direction on two different streams here. So first one is either the museum or the updates to the complex. This first one.
Councillor Adams?
I'll be down for stream 1, doing the museum. And number 2, I would be down for municipal playgrounds, improved accessibility. AODA is coming up the next couple of years. And if we can have an opportunity to make it accessible with government money in the meantime, then that's something that we can do. I don't think we need to invest in the ball fields. Walking trail system would be a good one, but certainly accessibility for our parks would be my priority out of stream 2.
I could live with that.
Okay, so I've broken this down into, I have two different resolutions for the same item. So it's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. The council has received a list from staff for potential projects for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and that council identifies the following potential projects for application to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Community, Culture, and Recreation funding streams. Stream number 1 is the rehabilitation of the museum, and stream number 2 is the municipal playgrounds.
Councillor Owens?
Accessibility of the municipal playgrounds. I
Sorry,
don't
I
want
was
to,
just taking, I just put, it is here.
okay.
Okay,
Because
would
I
you
don't
like
want
me
to
to
see,
write
new-
the
I
entire
don't want to see
municipal
more
playgrounds?
playgrounds. I
Okay.
want to see the current playgrounds made accessible, and I think that was a very good point, Patrick. Thank you.
That is what staff is recommending, to improve accessibility and the addition of accessible structures at Civic and Splash Park.
Let's say we're successful, and at the time, our finances suck. Can we turn it down at that point?
I've never seen the government say no to that, as long as they prefer that you do it early on in the process.
But I'm just.
That's the only thing, yeah.
I'm just planning worst-case scenario, which I don't think is going to happen, but I just want to know before I vote.
All in favor? Approved, unanimous.
Okay, so the second part of this, it's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. The council directs staff to obtain minimum Class C estimates for the chosen projects for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, drawing from the Economic Development Consulting and Contracting Services budgets, and that staff report back to council for decision on submitting an application to both funding streams.
And as we get estimates in for doing that, we'll let you know, because with the museum, as I say, that could be a different beast by itself altogether.
All in favor? Unanimous, passed. Sherry Matthews, Treasurer, 2019 Capital Budget Update.
Okay, so Treasury actually has 6 reports on tonight, so as Stacy said, try and go quick. For the last 2, Ryan, our tax collector, is here, so he will join me for the last 2 because they're more related to tax. So the first one is the 2019 capital budget update. It is just for information purposes, just to give everybody an idea where we stand, just a wee bit of background. So the budget, the 2019 capital budget was passed on July 16th, 2019. The total was for almost 4.9, 4.1 of which related to new 2019 projects, and roughly almost 800,000 related to carryover projects from 2018. Now, there have been 2 capital budget amendments already on August the 13th, one related to 2 capital projects that because we didn't get the funding, we've canceled the projects. However, the money that would have been, we would have used gas tax funding to fund will now remain in that reserve fund. The other one was a Tech Pioneer one for the air conditioner in the servery, and we were able to find funds in various places to fund that, so there was no additional effect on the levy. One thing I did want to caution, you'll see on the spreadsheet, there's the column that says actuals. Please keep in mind those were only to September 6th. I had to cut it off at some point because I had to get input from the departments. So I know some of them had mentioned they had invoices, they hadn't been processed yet. If they weren't in the system, I did not reflect them. So it is to September the 6th. So everything was sent to the departments, and they gave me the feedback for the status, the comments, and the over or under budget based on what they knew to date. So I'll just flip through and see. Like I say, I'd rather, if you had a question, to let me know. The only one I will caution is on, or not caution, but mention, one of the carryover projects was King George, and the next report will relate to that one. So, like I say, as opposed to going through all 9 pages, if there are questions, and most departments are here that they could clarify if required.
Councillor White?
Not a question, but just I want to say thank you very much. This is absolutely brilliant, going through it and being able to compare, like I used to do before I sat at this table, of what was said, and then reports later on. Doing this step by step is amazing, and I do appreciate all your hard work and all staff's hard work on doing this, so thank you very much.
Councillor Owens?
Yeah, I agree with Stacy 100%, but I wanted to ask Joanne if she could make a note of the $4,000 for the parking lot gravel, waiting for further direction from council, because I would like to bring that back to council. I think there needs to be a slight improvement to that parking lot, and if Joanne puts it on the agenda, I'll bring it back to our next meeting.
Councillor Adams?
Yep, I echo the other councillors' comments. This is the type of metrics that we need to use to measure our decisions of council. Some reports similar to this is kind of what's expected for the master fire plan implementation direction that we provided. So this is the best format that we can use. So good job.
Okay. Can I realize this, I'm not talking capital, but I'm talking about operating budget. When do you think we could get an update?
Oh, no, oh, sorry, okay, an update for the operating, that would be the next one we want to work on. If we don't get it for the October 1st, it would be the October 15th.
Okay.
That is the next one, though. We figured the capital one was what everybody wanted to see first.
Yep.
So, like I say, the operating one is our next focus.
Thank you. Yep.
So I have a resolution that's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacy White. The council accepts the capital budget update up to September 6, 2019, as presented by the interim treasurer.
All in favor? Unanimous? Passed?
Okay, so the second one is, and I will mention, some of the ones that are coming up, a lot of this is history that we've had to dig around to find things, but so we'll do our best. So for this next one, it's amounts that were received from Hydro One, and it related to the King George subdivision. So based on what we've been able to find, in 2015, the town signed what they call a multi-service connection cost agreement with Hydro One related to the servicing of the King George subdivision. And under this agreement, assuming that certain conditions would be met, the town would be entitled to the full refund of the deposit that they had to give, which was over $77,000 plus interest, and also a refund of over $14,000 because Hydro does a calculation on, they're saying if you're gonna have all these properties come on to their system, they will generate revenue. So they do some type of a 25-year horizon. They come up with a number, and the 14,000 was the amount that they said their cost to install it would be less than what they projected in revenues for that 25-year horizon. So that's where the 14,000 comes in. Now, we didn't include that in the budget because we weren't sure. The whole point being that we would not have seen, we wouldn't have got back a certain amount of the deposit if we hadn't met all the connections. So we did. So the total amount is the 14,000 plus the interest off the 77, which amounts to the 17,186. Now, the reason we also wanted to bring this is you will see in the capital budget that the King George project is over budget by $3,608. So what we're suggesting in options is that you apply the 3,600 out of the 17,000 to fund that shortfall for that project. And then the rest you could put into the residential development reserve fund, which already exists. We already have that reserve fund. Or the other option is to just transfer the full amount, 17,000, to the residential development reserve fund, but you must keep in mind that somehow that $3,600 shortfall has to be funded somehow. So our recommendation is that council direct staff to apply the $3,600 out of the 17,000 and to put the balance into the reserve fund, the residential development reserve fund.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Sherry on that, but I would like an explanation as to why the project was over budget. And I don't know who would have the answer to that, but
I can give the first shot, and Don wants to come up after, but they were putting down sod and topsoil, and we had anticipated that they would be using topsoil and seeding, but they put down the the sod for the stability, and that cost extra. It's probably the right decision, but they should have, and this was with the contractors, they should have advised us ahead of time that that was the direction we're going in.
that's fine, but as you know, Wilf, when something's over budget, I'm gonna ask. That's just my,
I don't expect anything else.
yeah.
From Rick?
I could stay home.
So I have two resolutions to go with this one. So it's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacy White. The council directs staff to apply $3,608 of the $17,186 received from Hydro One to fund the excess amount for the 2019 King George Capital Project. So that's just taking the 3,000 from this 17,000.
All in favor? Unanimous, passed.
And then the second one is, it's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacy White, that council directs staff to transfer $13,578 from the $17,186 received from Hydro One to the Residential Development Reserve Fund.
All in favor? Unanimous.
Okay, so the next one is, this is just an effort to try and clean up some of the accounts. So what happened was, it came to our attention, we actually have one sewage treatment plant reserve fund and one wastewater capital projects reserve fund, but they're, both of them, the purpose is to defray the future costs of the water pollution control plant. So the sewage treatment plant reserve fund, the balance at the end of December 2018 was just over $28,000. And in the wastewater capital projects reserve fund, it's just over $423,000. I don't see a purpose to having two of them. They serve the same purpose, to defray the costs. So if council was in agreement that council approved the consolidation of those two into just one reserve fund called the wastewater capital projects reserve fund.
This resolution is moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacy White. The council approves the consolidation of the sewage treatment plant reserve fund and the wastewater capital projects reserve fund.
All in favor? Unanimous, passed.
next one is property tax and utility invoices, methods of payment. So there have been some inquiries about credit cards and pre-authorized payment plans. So a little bit of the background. So the current methods that are allowed at the town of Kirkham Lake for paying property tax and utility bills are cash, check, debit card, and or online banking, telephone banking. So there have been some inquiries. Credit cards were, my understanding from looking in the old records, the credit card payments were allowed in the past, but the use was discontinued in 2010, and I've attached the Schedule A where that happened, that they said. And the reason being, it was due to the high cost of service charges associated with the use of credit cards. Everything that we have seen, that assessment would still be valid. The cost is it's very expensive. And we did do a little bit of research too, and we looked at online just to see, we looked at Temiskaming Shores, Timmins, North Bay, Cochrane, and Cap. None of them accept credit cards as payment either. Now, the flip side of that is people have also inquired about pre-authorized payment plans. Now, for all those places that I mentioned above, they all do offer the pre-authorized payment plans. So I guess what we're looking for is direction. So first off, we would recommend that the policy from 2010, where it said credit card payments would no longer be accepted, that we stay with that. But council could direct staff to investigate and report back at a future date on whether or not you wanted us to investigate the pre-authorized payment plans. Now, having said that though, because there are certain concerns, I know people are for it, but I maybe Ryan could speak to this as well. If you've talked to people who have said that if we do implement it, there are certain concerns that you want to make sure are in place, whether it's the number of options you give people, whether it's a monthly plan, some do over 11 payments, some do on due dates. So, like I say, there are certain concerns, but if council directs us to investigate it, we can do that.
I think using credit cards would be a costly expenditure. You're talking the add-on fee of about 1 or 2%, so that would cut right into the cost we would have to budget for.
Well, and that was one of the things when I read, because that's the thing, this has happened at other places, and if you read other reports to councils, one of the things they're saying is keep in mind that those credit card fees are high, and that becomes a cost to all the ratepayers, and not just the ones that are paying by credit cards. That's a hit to your bottom line. So that was one of their concerns.
I think it's especially a high cost for people that are using the reward cards, where you start getting the 2% back and the travel miles and everything else. I think it would cost you maybe, I'm guessing more like 3% or 3.5% on some of those cards.
And it depends exactly on the type of
On
card.
the type of card that's being used, yeah. And I think if I was given the option, I would use my credit card and take the travel miles.
Has there been a strong demand for automatic payment plan?
Actually,
I know myself, I do it monthly, but I do it on my own, online.
Online, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, for years now, we've been getting requests to have pre-authorized payment. I mean, most people, well, a majority of people pay their bills already this way, and it's something that's offered through any other utilities or things like that. So, yeah, and it's been brought to council in the past. It was rejected at that time, but it's still an ongoing request.
Councillor White?
Is it possible to know how many ratepayers are actually doing this on their own as it stands today? Like, would we be able to get a number of how many residents are paying by post-dated checks every month? Or would you like to see the value of it, like a statistic value of, well, people are already doing this? Like, is that too much?
We'd have to pull certain records to be able to. Post dates, I'm not so sure. Do you know what I mean? It would just get processed as a check when it gets cashed. So we can try. Let's put it that way. I'll have to pull some reports and see so do you want like in the space of a year? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, it was just a curiosity to back up the need for this service. Like, if we already have X amount of people doing it on their own, that actually does support the need to offer it more so than just random people have asked about it.
Yeah, so
You know what
I,
mean?
like when I get a request for it, that's kind of the explanation I'll give to people, and I'll work with them. The difference is it's up to the ratepayer to manage that on their own, right? Where, you know, I think a lot of time the help on our end, where we kind of manage it for them, is a benefit to a lot of people and something they would appreciate, I think.
But is post-dated check feature used very much these days? I don't
Not
know.
as much anymore. I mean, there are some, but it's getting less and less. I mean, the banks don't even really want to give out checks anymore, and I know the fees for checks are a lot. So that's dwindling. The online banking is, I think, more of a prominent feature with people's paying, and they could set up their online payments that way. But again, it's up to them to manage, and it's a little more difficult.
Yeah, I don't think we want to promote post-dated checks, honestly, because it's a manual process that causes a lot of extra work, administration.
Sorry, I figured it would be able to have my brain is an old system of doing things. Sorry.
Councillor Owens?
Yeah, the church I attend, they push the pre-authorized payment. And the feeling is that people won't miss a Sunday whether they're there or not. And my feeling with pre-authorized payment is sometimes we have problems collecting taxes and water bills, that our amount of unpaid bills would probably go down, not a significant amount, but a little bit. The other reason I like it is because currently my taxes and water bills come directly off my wife's pay. But she's due to retire in the next year or so. And when that happens, the thought of having to have all that money in one place at one time to make an installment, quarterly payment is pretty scary to me. The thought of have to remember to come down to town hall monthly or whatever to drop off a check, there's a higher likelihood I won't remember or whatever. I know there was some sort of research done in the past, which I believe you got a copy of.
It's from 2013,
Yeah.
so whether it would still
Yeah.
be relevant.
But there was a survey done, an informal survey. I don't know how scientific it is. We could look at doing another one of those. But personally, I think we should go that route as long as, there aren't high costs involved for the municipality, and as long as our computer system and the bank systems and all that can match up. Personally, I would probably use that system.
Councillor Adams?
I'd be in favor of looking into it and just see what the report says back.
Okay, this one I have two resolutions, and the first one has to do with the policy that's dated 2010. So it's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Casey White. The council has been presented with the existing credit card policy dated January 25th, 2010, and the council approves that it remain in effect at this time.
All in favor?
Okay, and the
Unanimous,
second one
passed.
is moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Casey White. Stacy White, sorry. It's 7:30. The council directs staff to investigate and report on the addition of the option of pre-authorized payment plans for ratepayers.
All in favor? Unanimous, passed.
Okay, so the next one, I'll start it, and Ryan can jump in if I go off track here. So as far as the background on this one, it's to do with the write-off of taxes, and there's a section in the Municipal Act, Section 354. So we have a property that has previously been taken to tax sale. It was in 2016, and no bids were received. So the property is once again eligible for tax sale with the advertising to be completed in late September or early October, which is why we wanted to bring it to council now. property's been in arrears for many years, and the taxes continue to accrue on the property each year. Now we're to the point where the tax arrears probably exceed the value of the property. So there is a possibility that there still could be a successful tax sale if we were able to get the tax arrears down to a more realistic value that would reflect the value of the property. So Ryan had mentioned that there has been success on the town's part in the past when some of the taxes have been written off and the property goes back to a tax sale. So what would happen then is that what they call the cancellation price would be reduced as opposed to what it is right now. So under section 354.3 of the Municipal Act, it permits the treasurer to recommend the taxes be removed from the tax roll when the property has been subject to an unsuccessful tax sale. And so just to keep in mind what taxes mean in this particular instance is it's the property taxes, penalty, interest, charges, and fees. So what we've done is we've broken this down. So what we're recommending is writing off, and please keep in mind the balances that we've referenced is when we were writing the report. Penalties and interest accrue monthly, so you'll see in our recommendation, it would be the property taxes to 2017, the penalties and interest to the date of the write-off, which would be fairly close to that, but it could be a bit different, and the tax sale costs at the time of write-off. So all reasonable and appropriate collection efforts have been tried to this point. If the property doesn't sell after the next tax sale, the only other option then, once again, would be to remove taxes from the tax roll, or sorry, a further tax write-off, or another tax sale attempt. So as far as budget implications, the majority of the municipal portion of this write-off would have been expensed in a previous year, because each year we go through the allowance for the doubtful accounts, and it goes into the allowance, which would have been reflected in the expense accounts in those years. The only thing that would hit this year's tax write-off budget would be the current year, which would be roughly it would more once the next penalty and interest is run, but you're looking at probably $7,000 to $8,000 for the current year. So your options are to write off the requested amounts and re-advertise the tax sale with a lower adjusted cancellation price, or to not write off the requested amounts and re-advertise for the full unadjusted cancellation price. What we would recommend is to authorize the treasurer to write off the uncollectible accounts on this tax sale file 18-10 pursuant to the provisions of section 354 of the Municipal Act as follows. As mentioned, the property tax up to and including taxation year 2017, penalties and interest up to and including the date of write-off, and the tax sale costs up to and including the date of write-off, with the appropriate portion to be charged back to the applicable school boards, and that council direct staff to re-advertise this tax sale file with the lower adjusted cancellation price after the above write-off has been completed.
Can you clarify, once a property is registered, are we still adding on the interest penalty out?
Yes.
I mean, it's doubtful after it's been registered.
But unless it's written off, it still accrues.
I mean, we're writing off money that we're never gonna collect anyway.
Well, that's the point, is that
Yeah.
the value's too high right now.
Yeah. Councillor White, sorry.
Sorry, how does it differ from a sale of surplus land?
So with tax registration, these are properties that the town doesn't own, so surplus land would be land that we already possess. So in a tax registration situation, the town doesn't have ownership of these properties. But because of the act, for unpaid taxes, after 2 years, we can register a tax certificate, and then after a year after that, we can put these properties up for public auction, and hopefully somebody will bid on them and take these properties over.
Councillor Owens?
So, as always, accounting is not my forte. I just want to make sure I'm understanding exactly what's happening here. So, you're asking us to write off 157 and change? Is that what you're asking?
The town's portion would be 146,749.
Okay, now, when the property goes up for sale, about how much is the tax, like, what it's gonna be advertised as the minimum bid on it?
I think it was down to around 11,000, somewhere there.
Oh. Okay, no, it's just, when I read all this, I thought we were writing this off, but I didn't see the approximate. Okay, yeah, that, if it's the property that I think it is, it's gonna sit there forever at $157,000. I mean, that's totally in for that property.
So I have a motion that's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacy White. The council approves the write-off of uncollectible taxes from tax file 18-10 in accordance with the provisions of sections 354 of the Municipal Act, and staff re-advertise with the adjusted cancellation price.
All in favor? Passed, unanimous.
Okay, last one. This one, the background, there are a vacant unit rebate and a vacant excess land subclass programs that are in place, and they've been in place since 1998. So starting in 2017, and for future years, the province is allowing municipalities to have more flexibility to tailor those programs to reflect community needs, circumstances, and still considering the interests of local businesses. So program changes can include phasing out or ending the programs where the rebate or reduction is eliminated by a specific year or over a period of years. So just to give you a brief outline of the program. So the vacant unit rebate program, it provides a rebate of 30% of the property tax for vacant commercial space and 35% for vacant industrial space. And it requires an annual application, and it's administered by the municipality, and it includes a number of eligibility requirements which must be met. The town currently budgets for this cost, the town currently budgets for the cost of providing these vacancy rebates. Elimination of this program could provide a direct budget opportunity or could be used to provide mitigation against future budget increases. Now the other, so for this program, it's people actually coming in, bringing an application to the town, and if it's approved, then there is that reduction. The vacant excess land property tax subclass program, this provides a 30% reduction in the tax rates that would otherwise be levied for municipal purpose on commercial properties, and it's a 35% reduction on the tax rates that would otherwise be levied for industrial properties, but this does not require a application process. Eligibility is determined by MPAC annually and reflected in the year-end tax roll provided to the municipality, effectively discounting the upfront annual tax bill for such properties. So just for an example, if you were to take our bylaw that has our tax rates, you would actually see that the line that'll say commercial vacant or industrial vacant, currently for the commercial you'd see it as being 70%, and the industrial will be 65%. And it used to work the same way for the education, and we'll actually get to that part. But so any changes to this program, though, just to be clear, you wouldn't see a direct reduction in the budget. All you would see is a shifting amongst the tax classes as to where the revenue would go. Some of the challenges of the existing program is that, and actually if you read online about it, that's what it says, is it's a disincentive to have people improve their commercial and industrial properties. So the offshoot of that would be that eliminating the program could provide an incentive for people to improve their properties. Currently, there is an actual municipal cost because there is a loss of taxation revenue, in particular with the vacant unit rebate program. The eligibility requirements, they're considered to be too broad in general. There's no limitation on the number of years that a property can be considered vacant and eligible. And the fact that Ryan had done a little summary, I mean, the same properties are coming back year after year for that because there is no limit on it. There's online, when you read about it, there's numerous references to the fact that it's double dipping because MPAC reduces the assessment of a property, plus they're getting they can apply for those unit rebates. And the vacant unit rebate program is application based. So once again, that's administered by the municipal staff. And just to point out, the province has also announced that it is eliminating the vacant unit rebate program and the vacant and excess land subclass treatment for the education portion of the tax bill. So for 2019, Instead of the percentages being 30% and 35, it was 15 and 17.5. By the time you get to 2020, they will be eliminated completely. So some of the options so if a municipality wants to decide to change the programs, you have to follow these 3 steps, which include engaging the public and business owners to ensure that these changes are in line with public opinion, notify the province of our intent to utilize the available flexibility, and provide details of the proposed changes along with the council resolution in order to have the required regulatory amendment made. So once public consultation has been held, council can choose to keep the program as is, eliminate the programs, or phase out the programs over a number of years. And so what we're recommending is that council direct staff to consult with the general public, including the business community, and to report back to council as to the results of these consultations prior to recommending any changes to those programs.
Councillor Adams?
I accept the recommendations.
My concern if we eliminated the program would be that we may end up with more properties coming back to us in default. So, my thoughts.
Ryan, you have a comment on it?
Just that so for the actual rate, the rate reduction part, the number of the value of assessment that fall within those vacant classes, it's pretty minuscule compared to, you know, the rest. So I mean, you also look at it as, yeah, there's an incentive for those properties, they're getting a rebate, but is it fair to the rest of the commercial properties and industrial properties who are paying the full rate, and these ones are getting a bit of a break? But again, it's not you can see from some of the budget implication numbers, it's not huge dollar values, and it shouldn't affect a large group.
Okay.
So I have a motion that's moved by Councillor Stacey White, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council directs staff to consult with the general public, including the business community, concerning any changes to the vacancy rebate and reduction programs, and report back to council at a future date.
All in favor? Unanimous, passed. Joanne?
The first item that I want to talk to you about was in addition to the agenda, and it's just a notice of a few closed meetings that are coming up for council. As everybody is aware, closed meetings are not something that is to be done, and especially if it is, there's reasons, there's certain criteria. So next Tuesday, September 24th, there will be a Property Standards Committee meeting. These are confidential meetings. Council as a whole sits on the Property Standards Committee, and so there's all of council plus one member of the public that sits on this, and we will be holding a Property Standards meeting at, I believe it is 5 o'clock on next Tuesday. Also just in council chambers here, yes. Strategy Corps, who is the organization that's been hired to do the corporate organizational review, will be meeting with council confidentially on October 3rd and 4th. The times for that have not been set yet, but it will be at Heritage North, and this is just an in-depth conversation between council members and the members of the Strategy Corps. So that's just to give proper notice to the public that those will be happening.
Is it 2 meetings or 1?
For Strategy Corps, it's 2 meetings, 2 3-hour meetings, my understanding is. We just have not set the date, the times yet. So it will be one on the Thursday, one on the Friday.
What was the date of the Recreation Committee meeting, Joanne?
On the 24th, Tuesday, September 24th, I believe it's at 7 o'clock.
And what's the date of this? Oh, at 7, okay.
At
Yeah.
7 o'clock.
No, I just
So
had
we'll be here
24th
all
written
evening
here
together.
twice, and I was getting a little concerned.
The other item that I am just bringing up to you is the Chamber of Commerce, and this is their annual Santa Claus Parade. And so I have a resolution that's moved by Councillor Casey Owens and seconded by Councillor Stacey White. The council approves the request from the Chamber of Commerce to hold the Santa Claus Parade on Friday, November 22nd, beginning at 7 o'clock.
All in favor? Passed. Ashley?
This is just a request of council to declare Waste Reduction Week in Kirkland Lake from October 21st to the 27th. It's essentially a way to demonstrate the importance of waste reduction and encourage residents and businesses to contribute to environmental protection. Typically what we do is every day of the week we'll have a special post on Facebook and social media on our website. Just different, the circular economy kickoff is planned for Monday, October 21st. Information on textiles and how to dispose of those, October 22nd. So there's a list of things that we're going to do that week just to bring awareness to reducing waste.
Councillor Owens?
One quick comment. Thank you, Ashley, for not spending money on advertising and using social media. Thank you.
Following the new policy.
Okay.
It's moved by Councillor Stacey White, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council declares October 21st to 27, 2019 as Waste Reduction Week in and for the town of Kirkland Lake.
All in favor? Passed, unanimous.
The second report has to do with the municipal hazardous or special waste service agreement. This is for when we decide to do material hazardous waste events. Essentially, if we want to receive any type of revenue associated with disposing of these products, this agreement needs to be signed. So it's just to bring the terminology within the agreement in line with the Circular Economy Act that's recently been adopted. So it's just changing the language a little bit.
That'll come back as a bylaw.
The third report has to do with the awarding of a request for tender for 2 3/4 ton trucks. We'd only received one bid for this tender. Both prices are listed within the report. We did reach out to local dealers because we were obvious that, or it was obvious that we didn't get any local dealers bidding on this, on the tender, which we thought was surprising. It turns out that the trucks that we were requesting, or 3/4 ton trucks in general, are very hard to come by in this type of, late in the year. Sorry, it's not working as well as it was this morning. So when we reached out, they said it was essentially an issue that would have been had by the majority of any dealerships in Ontario. We do have one of these trucks actually having to be produced in 2020, so it will result in that truck being carried over to 2020 budget.
Ashley, this refers to half tons.
No, 3/4.
Need the magnifying glass.
Oh, sorry.
I did receive a call from the local dealers. They said the reason why they didn't bid was, it said immediate possession.
Okay, we did receive the comments back. Gary spoke to them. I know that, yeah, I can go back and verify, but.
Did they contact us?
We contacted the local buyers. We reached out to them to determine whether or not there was any issue, like to find out why they didn't bid. And the understanding that we got was that there wasn't an ability to produce the vehicles until right now. They didn't have an access to those vehicles right now.
It's interesting. They said they didn't bid because it was
An immediate need?
immediate delivery.
Okay.
I'll get back to them.
Okay.
They were contacted.
Yep, yeah, for sure.
I think that's reasonable.
I have a bylaw for this. I'm just asking if we can maybe do this now while Councillor Owen's not in the room. That's all right, with you? Yeah. So it's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Stacey White, the bylaw 19-096, being a bylaw to authorize the purchase of 2 3/4 ton trucks from Georgian Chevrolet Buick GM City, be read a first, second, or GMC, sorry, not GM City. GMC be read a first, second, third time enacted and passed.
All in favor? Passed. Introduction, reading, and consideration of bylaws.
It's moved by Counselor Casey Owens, seconded by Counselor Stacy White. The bylaw 19-095, being a bylaw to authorize mayor and clerk to execute an amending agreement with Stewardship Ontario for municipal hazardous or special waste services, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
External or internal?
Sorry, I'm getting losing my voice too. We have gone to third party, and we're getting the information in from that. One of the things that has come forward is that the municipality would be wise to put into position first a tax collection policy, and so we're developing that, and that will establish the rules for how the collections proceed, be it with a third party, be it with our own, but it sets up the framework for that operating. We're doing that at the same time as we're getting the results back from a couple of companies that do offer the service, and we'll be bringing that forward to council probably on October 1st.
Any other comments or questions? Notices of motion? None declared? Whoop, sorry.
I have a few people asking me about this beautiful aquatic center. It's always closed on every holiday when families want to go for a swim, and I just wonder if we can get somebody to have a look at potentially the cost of opening the facility on days when people aren't normally working on vacation days.
Councillor Adams.
That question was provided through questions for council. I think that was about $2,000 to keep that open, and it would just be a budgeted item. We can send that to the rec committee to see what they would prefer. I would like to see it, but it would just come down to $2,000 and where it would be, right? So certainly the holidays, exactly, and certainly the holidays of like Family Day or Labor Day, right? Those kinds of days, I'm in favor.
Thank you. Councillors' reports? Oh, sorry.
Moved
Just
by
a moment.
Counselor, sorry.
Go ahead.
Moved by Counselor Stacy White, seconded by Counselor Casey Owens, that bylaw 19-097, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held September 17th, 2019, be read a first, second, third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Yes, unanimous. Councillors' reports? Councillor Ivanov.
I attended a Chamber of Commerce meeting this week. Very, very energetic and ambitious group of people. They've set up the December 4th dinner with Santa Claus. The Santa Claus Parade are happening on November 22nd. October 10th, they're doing Meet the Candidates Night, and they're doing Small Business Week from the 21st to the 25th. I just want to say that they're very, very ambitious and energetic, and they've got a lot of enthusiasm. So, very, very good committee.
Thank you. Councillor White?
This past week, the mayor and I were able to sit down with the new board of the Save La Salle Theatre. We have encouraged them to bring a report to council just on their update, just for information purposes only. So I look forward to hearing from them at council chambers in the near future.
Yeah, just to add to that, Stacy, they have a new board, and they're looking at a bunch of different alternatives and getting their business plan in place. So I think they are starting to make some progress. In addition, I attended the Northern College graduation and addressed the graduates of the core drilling program at Northern College. It was an enjoyable few hours. Any other comments? Okay. Adjourn.
I'd
Yep.
like to comment on this letter from Ms. Bevan.
Yep.
She does have some concerns about the intersection of Churchill and Second Street, and she's actually asked if it's possible to have a crossing guard put there. So staff is looking into this and bringing a report. We do have the OPP who has already done one focus patrol, and they're looking at doing another one during the next week or two and reporting back to us. We will try to get in touch with the school board also to give their comments on that and see about it. So I just didn't want it to get lost. We are taking care of it, we are looking into it, and we will bring back a report to council.
Joanne, while they're doing that, is it possible to review Churchill at Carter? The yield sign doesn't seem to make any difference. People come sailing through there off of Carter and turning left onto Carter as well, coming down Churchill. And there has been some near misses and a number of, I think if they check the records, a number of accidents in that particular area. So maybe we can add that to their list when we're talking with Ryan.
Certainly.
Councillor Owens?
And I'd just like to add, since the post is already there, we won't be looking at $800 to install it. All we gotta do is take one sign down and put another one up if we decide to go that route. Eh?
Is that a challenge?
No, a resident pointed that out to me this week, so I'm passing it on.
I have a motion that's moved by, sorry?
Councillor Perry?
Excuse me, since we're talking signs, several months back, I brought up some issues in Swastika with speeding, and they were supposed to look at some signage and all that, and I still have not heard anything back on that.
Ashley, do you have that? Ashley, Jenna? Actually, can we add the Carter and Churchill to it and, oh, okay, because
think
there's
this-
two stop signs, that would put two stop signs at a kitty corner there too, right? Thank you.
It's moved by Councillor Stacy White, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council adjourns its regular meeting of September 17th, 2019 to an in-camera meeting pursuant to Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act to discuss one issue concerning union negotiations and one issue concerning an identifiable person.
All in favor? Thank you for your patience.